Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. I am Buckeye Mike, and today I'm joined by Brandon Olsen from Locked On Gators. Obviously, we're going to talk about the Florida Gators today. How you doing?
Fantastic. Great momentum recruiting for Florida. So I cannot complain.
Um, I know it's been a while since
Yeah, a little bit.
since we all talked. Let's talk 2022. I know that it probably didn't really go the way people expected it to go. Um, what are your thoughts on the season, and where do you stand on the Billy Napier train?
2022 was, let me say, after week one, beating Utah, I don't think I've ever been more confident in a Florida program since I started covering them. And then losing to Kentucky in Gainesville in week two, barely beating USF in Gainesville in week two, really just put a damper on that. I was like, okay, this is going to be one of those kinds of seasons. And I mean, almost beating Tennessee, and then losing to LSU in just one of the worst ways, where it was just didn't score or didn't complete a pass for like 2 quarters. You play Tom Petty's won't back down like they do at the start of every fourth quarter, and the first play of the fourth quarter, Anthony Richardson with like an 80-yard rushing touchdown. It was just, that's about as good as you can describe this season, where there were so many highs and so many lows, but it was just consistently inconsistent was the way that Florida wanted to live 2022, and that's what they did. And as far as Billy Napier, like, I think in 2022 he reached expectations, because for me at least, expectations were make a bowl game. And for so much of Gator Nation, it was make a bowl game and do something Dan Mullen never did, recruit. And that's what Billy Napier's been doing. So for Napier right now, and I know that there are quite a few like national people who will tell you Billy Napier's on the hot seat. Everybody that covers the University of Florida
Mm-hmm.
and everybody that has at least one working brain cell will tell you Billy Napier is not on the hot seat. Nothing will happen this year that can even put Billy Napier onto the hot seat. Right now, depending on where you look, Billy Napier has a 3 to 5, like top 3 to 5 class for 2024 lined up, and he's not done yet. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is just Billy Napier. It was always set. This is going to be a long process. We're not going to do what we did with McElwain and Mullen and go, okay, you've got 2, maybe 3 years. This is Florida putting in the effort and knowing this is going to be a process and giving Billy Napier his due time. So for the people that think Napier is on the hot seat, he's not. And even if you think he should be,
Mm-hmm.
if Florida were to get rid of Billy Napier, let's say after this year, they'd
Mm-hmm.
be still paying Dan Mullen, Billy Napier, and whoever the new head coach is. So they're not going to spend $18 million per year on a new head coach. So regardless of how you feel about Nape specifically, contractually, they're just not going to do that. That's not a financially smart decision for Florida.
So the name calling towards Florida, like Sunbelt Billy, sorry, not sorry, Uncle Lou, is kind of unjust in a sense. And do you think that Florida has finally started to take their football program seriously since, I would probably say, the Urban Meyer era?
Yeah, absolutely. Florida has always prided itself on being an everything school, but
Mhm.
for the past decade, they've been an everything but football school. Baseball's been great. Basketball's been up and down, and you took your swings, but that looks like it's an upswing too. This is Florida is finally investing again in their football program, and it's shown. Like they just started investing in it again, and immediately the recruiting class picked up like crazy. It's been one of the wildest recruiting weekends that I've ever seen, just as a fan of Florida for the past 27 years. So it's crazy. And the Sun Belt Billy thing, it's just stupid. It's there's no other way to put it than it's stupid. Because you look at everybody, and I know people like the main point is the Sun Belt is in the Group of Five, and therefore when you're going from the Group of Five to the SEC, or going from the Group of Five to Power Five, we're going to disrespect you. Same thing happened with Mike Norvell when he came from Memphis to Florida State. He looks like he's finally putting that together. But like, do you know who else used to coach in the Group of Five? Everyone. Everyone. Nick Saban started at Bowling Green. Urban Meyer started at Toledo. Like this is not any, or maybe that's flipped. But regardless, they started at two MAC programs. Like they were G5 as well. So to go, oh, Sun Belt Billy, it makes no sense. That's the thing that irritates me the most about it. I don't care about you going, oh, he's from the Group of Five. So it bothers me in the sense that it makes no sense. Talk all the trash that you want, but it makes no sense to go, he's from the Group of Five, therefore he can't work out in the SEC, because it's been proven time and time again they can go from Group of Five to a Power Five program and find success, because guess what? Everyone that has ever been a meaningful coach in college football has done it. So that's why I'm like, to me, it makes no sense. That's the most irritating part about it. Talk all the trash you want, though.
I mean, I'm not trying to get completely off track, but I mean, you're not wrong. Like you said, Nick Saban did it. Urban Meyer did it. Before that, the great Woody Hayes did it. I mean, he started at Miami, Ohio, and came to Ohio State, and the rest is history. So, I mean, as downgrading as it is to people, go look at the history books. I mean, it's been known to happen. Can you kind of touch on the 2023 class as far as recruiting, and like, did this class meet your expectations? Is there any standouts in the class that you're kind of gravitating towards as far as like, out of this class, he could be my favorite player, or maybe not favorite player, but like, watch out for him because he could be a threat, or hey, pay attention to this dude because he could really become something?
Yeah, I think for 2023, it pretty much hit my expectations as far as where they'd wind up. I remember before the season, I said, as long as they're top 12, I'm happy. They ended up exactly 12th, so I'm happy. But I think when you look at just who's going to be a standout, I think Jakeem Jackson's one of them. 6'1", 180 pounds, insanely long arms, great athlete at corner. Like, he's one of the few true freshmen where he can legitimately step into this roster right away and play pretty consistently. Offensively, one that I think is going to take a little bit longer but has insane potential is Aiden Mizell, 6'2", 180, and he's the fastest player on the team immediately. So I think adding him into a strength and conditioning program, getting him with Billy Gonzalez, who's wide receiver coach for Florida, that I think is a tremendous developer of talent. I think recruiting is a fair concern to raise with him, considering he was just with Dan Mullen, but he was also with Urban Meyer before that. So I think that recruiting is a fair thing to at least bring up as a cause for concern. But as far as developing talent and getting them to the NFL, I mean, Billy Gonzalez has proven he can do that. Whether you want to talk about whether they succeed at the next level or not is up for discussion, but he gets guys to the NFL. No doubt about that. So Aiden Mizell being immediately the fastest player on the team at receiver, that really, I mean, he didn't have to do much in college, in high school, and in college, he's going to get to stretch the field. He's going to get to work on jet sweeps. He's going to be used as kind of an offensive weapon type. I think looking at Aiden Mizell is the guy that I'm just so ecstatic for on the offensive side of the ball. And for me, it's Jakeem. I'm a DB kind of guy. So getting Jakeem Jackson as our top-ranked DB, second highest-rated player in the class, if I'm not mistaken, just a huge add for this program that desperately needed some life into that corner room.
The biggest question maybe some of the people are asking is, how do you think Graham Mertz is doing, and how do you think he will do coming from Wisconsin to Florida? I do believe it is a different style of offense. It's a different kind of playbook. Do you think that getting Mertz was a good idea? Because just if we just talk about just Mertz for a few minutes, when he debuted in 2020, COVID year, his first game was Illinois, and Illinois, no offense, Illini, is bottom. I wouldn't say dumpster fire, the Big Ten anymore, but definitely bottom tier in the Big Ten. So for them to win the game against Illinois in his debut doesn't shock me. But if you look at the rest of his time, to me, now granted, I'm Ohio State, so I didn't fully pay attention to him. But from what I remember at his time at Wisconsin, after that game, the rest of his stretch was anywhere from average to okay.
Yeah, I think that the people who think Graham Mertz is going to come in and change this team, I think that's a bit much. I will say, for me, the biggest selling point is you kind of know what you're getting with Graham Mertz. Like you kind of know you're just getting average or okay play at quarterback. And for a team that they want to run the football, 60% of the time, that's okay. I think when you look at going from Anthony Richardson to Graham Mertz, obviously they're two starkly different quarterbacks, and you lose the explosion that Anthony Richardson brought to the run game and even to the passing game. But what you gain are, not missing slants and curls and not short arming a screen or overthrowing a screen. I think what you lose in explosiveness, you gain in consistency with Graham Mertz there. So I think the offense is going to be less explosive. I think it's going to be more consistent. But also for Graham Mertz, we kind of know what we're getting, but we don't fully know what we're getting because he was operating, a 1903 offense before the forward pass was a legal part of football with Wisconsin. So, and here's the thing too, with Florida, scheme-wise, you can give Florida all the flack you want. It's not a modern scheme in the fullest extent of, spreading things out and going this wide zone style. They go wide zone. Their run game is incredibly modern. Their pass game uses modern concepts at the wrong time. But I think that you're going to see just a more modern offense than you saw Graham Mertz ever operate. And so he's going to be better. He's still not going to be great, but he's going to be better than he was at Wisconsin. That's my thing. I'm like, I know he's going to be improved just because the offense is going to put him in better spots. Will he be great? No. I don't need him to be great, though. I need you to just convert the passes that we need, the slants, the digs. Just do those things and hand the ball off, and you can do your job. So Graham Mertz isn't revolutionary in any way, sense, shape, or form of the word. But as long as he can do his job, I'm cool with it.
So I have two questions off of this. So one, do you feel like Graham Mertz has the capability to, quote, lay the foundation for I keep wanting to call him Sunbelt Billy. I'm so obsessed with Uncle Lou. Billy Napier's style of offense and help lay the foundation towards Florida having success. I mean, like Urban Meyer era success again. And two, there were so many big name quarterbacks in the portal. Are you happy with and okay with the addition of Graham Mertz? Would you have rather seen Florida try to get Cade McNamara, who, yes, I know he's Michigan, but my God, for the style, or my goodness, for the style of offense that you guys run, the dude would tear it up. Casey Thompson, to a degree, I feel like Casey Thompson, even though, yes, he did transfer from Nebraska to Florida Atlantic to go play with my man Tom Herman, I feel like Casey Thompson is the closest thing to Anthony Richardson that we've seen recently. For me, those are the two biggest names I can think of that I know I talked about, at least Casey. But yeah. So, your thoughts?
Florida went with Graham Mertz because he was there, and they didn't want to miss out on having him. Because at least with him, you know your ceiling is limited, but you also know your floor is kind of set. As far as Casey Thompson, my understanding is Casey Thompson was either going to Auburn or FAU. And from what I was told, Casey's kind of just getting ready to be a coach. Like, he knows he's not going to the NFL. He's kind of just getting ready to be a coach. Cade McNamara was never an option for Florida. Florida had 4 quarterbacks that I'm aware of that they were interested in. Sam Hartman was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
He was not going to get medically cleared by Florida, so he falls out. Mm-hmm. Grayson McCall was another. Mm-hmm. Grayson McCall could not academically get into Florida, so he's out. Okay. Michael Pratt was another one, and he never hit the portal. Tulane's quarterback never hit the portal, but he was one where if he hit the portal, Florida was going to sell out for him. Mm-hmm. He did not hit the portal. And then it's Graham Mertz. So your options were someone who couldn't get in, mm-hmm. someone who wouldn't be cleared, or someone who never hit the portal, or Graham Mertz. So that's kind of where we're at on Graham Mertz. He was not the first option, mm-hmm. but he was an option where you know what you're getting. You know he can operate your offense. And that's pretty much it. That's where we fall on why Graham Mertz is a Florida Gator. Is he going to break records? No. But he's not going to screw your team over. And that's kind of all we can go about that. As far as him getting the offense back on track, mm-hmm. I don't know what he can do. I don't think that Graham Mertz is the kind of quarterback that can elevate an offense. Mm-hmm. I think he can make an offense operate. I don't think he can elevate your offense. Where I think Graham Mertz's main job right now is don't screw the pooch while we're waiting for DJ Lagway in 2024 to come be a quarterback competitor.
So last thing on this part, how does it feel to go from, yes, oh my gosh, why did you do that, to, oh my gosh, it's the second coming of Chris Leak or Tim Tebow because he's not throwing a pick?
Feels good. Look, I loved AR, and I said this when Anthony Richardson was a backup. Mm-hmm. I said this when Anthony Richardson, right before he became a starter, and I said this when we were getting ready for the NFL draft. Anthony Richardson is one of the most physically gifted human beings on the planet. People like him don't exist. People his size can't run the way he runs. And if they can, sure as hell can't throw a football 75 yards in the air.
True.
But there were certain times when Anthony Richardson couldn't hit the side of a barn if he was throwing the side of a barn. And that's what you dealt with. So is this super exciting to have Graham Mertz? No. But again, as long as you can show up and do your job, Graham, I'm not going to hate on you for it. Like I don't expect you to be a Heisman candidate. With Anthony Richardson, there were unrealistic expectations for him to be a Heisman candidate because of what he can do. With Graham, I just need you to do your job. Show up and don't screw the entire team over, man. That's it. That's all I care about.
All right. So now let's go ahead and start portion that probably most people are clicking on this video for. Let's talk 2023. Now, you guys start the season Thursday night, August 31st. You got to travel to Rice-Eccles Stadium in Salt Lake City, Utah. I am pumped and hyped for this game. I was pumped and hyped for this game last year. I'll admit, I was not a Florida fan because I do like Utah. So I was rooting for Utah to win. And realistically, that, if I remember correctly, that game was anybody's game last year. I do think that we're looking at another anybody's game this year with Utah. I do expect it to be close. For me, it's just a matter of, like we've kind of been hinting at, How's your offense going to run as far as just running the offense itself? How's Utah's defense going to look? They have lost key pieces on both sides of the ball. But, of course, they do still have Mr. Iron Man himself at quarterback, surprisingly. But I do think this is going to be close. I believe it was like 24-17 last year. I think it will be something like that. You can go more in depth of your thoughts on this, but I'm going to say 28-24 Utah. They're going to get their revenge. You're going to split the home and home because it is hard as frick. You can even ask USC. It's hard as frick to play at Rice-Eccles. Oh, and are you scared with this game?
Not scared. I think Florida wins it. I think it's another toss-up. But I think Florida wins it because Cam Rising, he's going to play.
Mm-hmm.
But he also did get ACL surgery in January. So he's going to play. But he's not going to be the Cam Rising that can pick up first downs with his legs. And that is mainly why I think Florida is going to win this. Just because Cam Rising's mobility is incredibly important for that team on third down specifically. And he's not going to be able to do that. And so I think that they're going to be forced to punch a lot. And that's my main thing. I understand it is very hard to go into Rice-Eccles Stadium and win. I understand elevation is a part of that. And elevation is going to hurt Florida. The same way Utah fans last year were going, well, Utah's used to playing at a higher elevation, so they can go into the humidity and play. Those are two different things, first off.
Yes.
And secondly, I hate that Gators fans are going, oh, well, we deal with the humidity, we can deal with elevation. They're different things. They're not the same. But for me, if Cam Rising is healthy, Utah wins that game. He's not going to be, though. And I don't care what anybody says at this point in June. Oh, yeah, he's going to be fine. He's going to play. He's going to play. He's not going to be fully healthy. And so for that reason, I think Florida's going to win the game. As far as the crowd at Rice-Eccles Stadium, look, Utah's got the best crowd in the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be 8th best in the SEC. So I'm not worried about the crowd. Elevation bothers me more than the crowd for this Utah game. I think Florida wins. I do think it's close. Last year was 29-26. I think this year is going to be lower scoring than that. So I think Florida's offense is going to be worse. I think Florida's offense is going to be less explosive. I think without Cam Rising, Utah's offense is going to be significantly worse. So I think this game is lower scoring. I don't know if it's any farther apart than 3 points, though. It's going to still be a very close game and a great game at that.
So do you think that Florida almost, as maybe some of the critics would say, lucked out with having Utah where it's at? Let's say, for example, instead of Utah being August 31st, let's say Utah was September 23rd, week 4. Do you think that maybe you're still as confident as you are, but it's more of a toss-up? We'll have a better idea of what Cam Rising looks like. He'll be healthier. Granted, he's probably going to be 80 to 90% coming into the game, which sometimes, like I said, he's freaking Iron Man at this point. Sometimes his 80 or 90% looks like 120, 150%. But do you think that maybe lucked out is not the right words to use, but do you think that maybe if there's some kind of fluke that we could see people making excuses and saying, well, it's the first game, or something crazy?
Look, that's what they said last year. Last year, Florida beat Utah, and it was Utah under Kyle Whittingham historically starts slow. I don't care. That's their fault. That's their problem. I care about who wins the game and why they won the game. Florida won the game last year because they played better football than Utah did. Simple as that. And for all the people that talked about the humidity, Utah's players were puking on the field in the third quarter. So I don't care about that. There's always going to be excuses, because if Florida loses, Florida fans are going to go first
elevation.
Yeah, first game with Graham Mertz. Elevation was a pain. They're playing so many freshmen. They're inexperienced. How are they going to win? I don't care, because at the end of the year, what matters is your win-loss record. So I don't care what reason, because there's always going to be a million reasons. If Texas beat Alabama last year, Bama fans are just going to go because Bryce Young was dinged up. Stuff it doesn't matter to me. Win or lose, that's what matters. Why it happened, don't care. That's why, the NFL likes to say any given Sunday. College can say any given Saturday. It doesn't matter what happened, or it doesn't matter why something happened. It matters who won the football game. And at that point, that's all that matters, really, for me. I don't care if it's elevation, humidity, injury, any of that. Who's got the better football team? Who wins this game? That's it. So, yeah, there's going to be excuses. If Florida wins, Cam Rising isn't healthy, and that's going to be the main reason. And because Utah starts slow historically under Kyle Whittingham. If Florida wins, it's going to be, or if Utah wins, it's going to be elevation, Graham Mertz, freshman. Doesn't matter. Win the damn football game. That's it.
Just win the game.
Yeah, that's it. Just you're here to win. Win the game.
We play to win the game.
We play to win the game. So win the damn thing. That's it. Don't care why.
Now, if we look at week 2 through, if I'm counting this right, 7. Okay, let's kind of breeze through the easy ones here. So week 2, September 9th, you got McNeese State coming into Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in Gainesville. That's a wash. I don't care what happens week 1, you're just going to mop the floor with these guys. You're looking at probably 59-0, 66-3 kind of range. I'm going to skip over week 3 because that's a big key one we need to talk about. I'm going to go to week 4. You have Charlotte coming in, the Charlotte 49ers, in the last of 3 straight home games, coming into Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in Gainesville. That's another wash, easy one. And then I'm going to skip the next one. Oh, Charlotte, I'm thinking around the same score, 66-3 kind of deal. Skip the next one because that's another big one. Then you've got Vanderbilt coming in for homecoming. Now, Vanderbilt always seems to be hey, I'm poking at you, don't take me for granted because I'm poking and just waiting every year. One of these teams, except for Alabama, historically, tends to slip up. But by now, we kind of know, at this point, we'll kind of know what Graham Mertz looks like and what kind of shape he's in and kind of where the team sits, whether that's 1 loss or 2 losses or none. Because historically, the 2 we haven't talked about do tend to go back and forth. 1 year, they get you. The next year, you get them. But we'll go more in detail in that in a second. But here with Vanderbilt, I think it's still kind of a wash, but you're looking more, okay, you're in SEC play. Vanderbilt's defense usually, historically, again, unless they play Bama or Georgia, tends to be pretty decent to pretty good, at least good enough to, keep your average down. They tend to be one of the people to bring your averages down. So I do think that's a win. For me personally, I think it's probably in the range of 41-24, kind of okay, we had the game in hand. We rested our dudes in the second half, closer to the fourth quarter, and Vanderbilt started to come back, but our defense was good enough to where they didn't let them fully come back, and our second string was good enough to keep the distance. And lastly, at South Carolina, that one's also tricky because South Carolina tends to be like Vanderbilt. So it's a matter of, can you guys do that in back-to-back weeks, one at home, one on the road? That's tricky, but I do think Florida wins again in that one. It should be a close one, should be a good game, and also is going to depend, same factors for Florida with Mertz, record, how the offense is doing, how good the defense looks at the time. It also, on the South Carolina side, Rattler, the offense, the defense, basically everything except having to do with Spencer Rattler. Can you convert Spencer Rattler, South Carolina versus Clemson back into Spencer Rattler, Oklahoma, massive interception Spencer Rattler? I think you don't fully convert him. I think you convert him enough to keep enough of a distance. It's probably a 38-28 kind of ordeal here, 10-point win. I know I ran through all that, but kind of with those games specifically, kind of give me your thoughts, and maybe if you differ in the idea of who's going to win with those games.
I think Vanderbilt's a wash, mainly because, and I'm not even going, oh, they're Vanderbilt. Mainly, Billy Napier lost to Vanderbilt last year. You can't lose to Vanderbilt 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And the way that they lost to Vanderbilt is just so embarrassing, of literally the entire team not showing up because it was cold. I don't care if it's cold. The entire team didn't show up, and that's unacceptable. So Florida this year, especially when you get Vanderbilt in the swamp, curb stomp them. Like it's as simple as that. Put your foot on Clark Lea's throat and stomp, because you need to. Mm-hmm. South Carolina, they're the hardest team in all of college football for me to project this year, just because you have no idea which Spencer Rattler you're getting. Are you getting the Spencer Rattler that people were like, oh, he might be a Heisman? Are you getting the Spencer Rattler that last year beat Tennessee and Clemson? Or are you getting the Spencer Rattler that showed up to Gainesville last year and played one of the worst games I've ever seen him play? And I've been in the camp of Spencer Rattler is still incredibly talented. He can still be a good quarterback. I believe that. He's shown enough flashes to keep me still believing that. Mm-hmm. But like Anthony Richardson, wildly inconsistent in a different way, too. Like Anthony Richardson is inconsistent from play to play. Mm-hmm. Spencer Rattler, like, you're getting good Spencer Rattler or bad Spencer Rattler. So it depends on that one. Because if South Carolina can get good Spencer Rattler, you're in for a hell of a game if you're Florida. If you get the Spencer Rattler that played against Florida last year, which, not to be disrespectful, but Spencer Rattler, to me, seems like the kind of quarterback that gets in his own head. Mm-hmm. So if you get the Spencer Rattler that is just constantly seeing flashbacks of what happened last year, him getting stiff-armed by a 450-pound defensive lineman, like if you get that Spencer Rattler, then South Carolina doesn't stand a chance. But the very next week, Spencer Rattler showed up, and that was either the Clemson or Tennessee game. He beat them both like in the 2 games following losing to Florida. So if you get good Spencer Rattler, you're in for a hell of a game if you're Florida. If you get bad Spencer Rattler, your defense is in for a hell of a good time against Spencer Rattler. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I do think possibly that, you do have a factor of you have to go to Columbia. It's in William Bryce Stadium. So that may play a factor to a degree. I mean, sometimes it seemed like Spencer was always better at home than on the road. So that's another part of, okay, like we said, which Spencer are we getting? But so I wanted to skip over the big 2 in the first half of the season because I wanted to hopefully give themselves a little more time. So let's go ahead. So in week 3, you have Tennessee coming in at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, September 16th. I would hope between what's his name, second-year head coach, Hooker's not there anymore, Hyatt's not there anymore. Florida needs to be out for blood, and this needs to be one of your key, not just key games, but if somehow Florida does pull this off and run the table and maybe only loses to Georgia or, few enough losses where they're in contention for the playoff, you need key moments in the season where, okay, this is a key factor of what's going to get you in. This is a key factor. This game and the other game we're about to talk about are key factors. I'm not saying slaughter these guys, but you need to come out with a motivation to slaughter them. Same with Kentucky, because I'm sorry, but I know it's Kentucky. It's Lexington, Kentucky. It's Kroger Field. I get all that. These freaking guys got away with a win last year, if you ask me. Because to me, AR had a Spencer Rattler moment where he showed up as the bad AR. And then, it flowed into next week. Like you said, you guys barely beat USF. And it's like, USF, you should be destroying USF. I hope, based on the offense we have this year, that Florida doesn't have one of those moments where it's like, okay, why aren't we killing these guys? But I'm interested to see an exciting game with Tennessee, also with Kentucky. I think for Tennessee, like I said, the offense is still going to be the same style. Maybe it's not going to be ran the exact same way because, like I said, Hooker's not there, Hyatt's not there. I think it's still going to be close. I'm thinking probably 33-27, but Florida is going to win this game. As far as Kentucky, I think, again, you guys win one, they win one. You guys win one, they win one. I think Kentucky had its magic moment last year with Florida beating them in Gainesville. Florida's going to return the favor as part of the back and forth. We're going to see a magic moment like we did Kentucky LSU with the bounce play from like 2002. I'm going to say 34-31 in a great game, but Florida's going to come out on top. Your thoughts on these two?
Yeah, I think Florida beats Tennessee this year. I feel moderately confident about that one just because, a few things. One, you mentioned Hendon Hooker's not there anymore. It's now Joe Milton, and Joe Milton, he's going to be given the Anthony Richardson treatment, whether he wants it or not. He's going to be treated as someone who Tennessee fans think he sucks, think that he's terrible, and that he doesn't deserve to be a starting quarterback. And then he's going to declare for the draft. And Tennessee fans are going to say it's a horrible decision, like they did with Anthony Richardson. And then he's going to be a first-round pick, but Joe Milton might not be a first-round pick, but he's going to be a high draft pick. Incredible athleticism for a quarterback, cannon for an arm. I think by week 3, he won't have a good enough grasp on commanding this offense. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's kind of where we differentiate as far as, or where Joe Milton differentiates from Hendon Hooker, is that he's not going to have that grasp on the offense. I also think that Florida's defense this year, or I know Florida's defense this year under Austin Armstrong, going to be way more aggressive than they were last year under Patrick Toney. And a big thing last year against Tennessee was that Hendon Hooker had plenty of time to make throws. And this year, you've now got Austin Armstrong, who in 2022, when he was the DC at Southern Miss, had the 8th highest blitz rate in all of college football, blitzing 40% of the time. So I don't think Tennessee's little switch verticals offense is going to have time to really come into effect at that point, in which case I think Florida wins Tennessee, especially Florida played a horrible game last year against Tennessee and almost won. Like, they played horrible for most of that game and almost won. I think it was 38-35, and it came down to literally not completing a Hail Mary at the end for Florida to lose that game. When you were at Neyland, when you were at Tennessee, this year in the Swamp, I don't think Tennessee is going to win this game. As far as Kentucky, I'm less confident in that one, just because Kentucky plays just such a crappy style of football that they drag you down to their level. And it's like, I have a saying that I like to say frequently where it's like, don't argue with an idiot. They'll bring you down to their level, and then they'll beat you with experience. That's how Kentucky plays football. They're going to play crappy football. They're going to bring you down to their level and beat you that way. It's why Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season with the Pittsburgh Steelers, because even when their team sucks, they bring you down and then beat you that way. And that's kind of how I view Stoops' entire tenure at Kentucky, where they've won 2 in a row, one in Lexington, one in Gainesville. And again, I think that they're going to be better this year than they were last year because I really think Will Levis was just an awful, pathetic excuse for a starting quarterback. So I think that they're going to be better this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Florida's defense is going to be able to give them more fits and that their offense is going to be less volatile. You're not going to see Anthony Richardson throwing an interception. I don't think the pick six was the pick six on the pick on the curl route to Naquan Wright on the out wide for some reason. But you're not going to see those kinds of plays happen. And so I think for that reason, it's going to be a very close game. Mm-hmm. And I genuinely think that's one of my very few toss-ups on this schedule of going, it could go either way. I think Florida's the better team, but Kentucky's style has just given Florida fits. And so that's where I'm kind of torn on if Florida's going to win or not, especially being in Lexington. If that's a night game, we're looking at a lot bigger problem because the time that they beat Dan Mullen in Kentucky was a night game and the crowd just caused havoc. I think Florida had, I think it was 17 penalties and like 9 of them were false starts. So their crowd can just give Florida fits at any time. Like Kentucky, I understand that they're not thought of as a highly respected program because one, they shouldn't be thought of as a highly respected program, but their crowd shows up for home games at night. So for that one, I'd say toss up, and just for the sake of giving Florida a loss, because I know Florida, I'm going to say Kentucky wins it, and I refuse to believe that Florida can start a season 7-0 right now.
So we're looking at roughly 6-1 or 7-0, basically at this point.
Yeah, I think your realistic range is 5-2 to 7-0, because I think Tennessee and Kentucky are very close. I think Florida should beat Utah with Cam Rising hurt. I think Florida's obviously McNeese, Charlotte. You should be the favorite, and you should win that one. Kentucky's a toss-up. Vanderbilt and South Carolina, you should win. I understand good Spencer Rattler could show up, and that changes the conversation. But for the time being, I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to show up when I just saw him not show up when he played Florida last year. I don't care what he did after.
Okay, so we go into the bye week from here, and then we're looking at the backstretch. It's a decent backstretch. I would hope that for Florida's sake, you're looking at 6-1 coming into the backstretch. So from there, after the bye on October 21st, we go to October 28th, the big, what is it, like the border rivalry or whatever they call it, Georgia at TIAA Bank Field in Jacksonville. There's a slight chance to me, just based on how simple and easy Georgia's schedule is, this could be a slip-up game for Georgia. You had 2 weeks to prepare coming into the game. And Georgia is bound to lose to either you guys or, I believe, Tennessee. They play Tennessee this year, I believe. So it's one of those two. I doubt it's both, but it's going to be one or the other, in my opinion. For argument's sake, I think it'll be close, but I think Georgia's going to win this one, sadly. They're just constantly on a tear, back-to-back champions, and again, their schedule is like banana pudding. It's so easy and smooth for the most part. Granted, they should have lost a couple of times last year, and I don't mean just the playoff game.
Missouri,
and there was one other game they should have lost last year too in the regular season. I just, this one's tough. If they're undefeated coming into the game, I think it'll be close. If they already have one loss, I think it's probably a curb stomp, just because Kirby's mindset is basically equivalent to Saban's, because he came up under Saban. So, with one loss, it's like, oh my gosh, steam coming out my ears like in cartoons, and my head's going to blow off the shoulders. So that one, like I said, up in the air. Then November 4th, you got Arkansas coming into town. Arkansas sometimes can be difficult, but I think it's a win. It's probably a double-digit win, probably around 38-24, maybe 38-14 range. Just depends on basically the same as everybody else. Quarterback play, offense, and defense for Arkansas specifically. And then you have at LSU, Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge. I do not like Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly has done a lot of good work just at LSU in 1 year. But I think you guys can get him. It's going to be tough and it's going to be close. Probably looking at like 35-34, 34-31 range. But I think you're going to get LSU. It's possible. Then you got at Missouri. Don't take them for granted, because we've seen what they can do to the best team in the SEC when taken for granted. If not taken for granted, Florida probably wins like 28-7 kind of ordeal. And before we get to that last one, I want to hear your thoughts on these first four.
Losing to Georgia. I'm throwing that one out there. Losing to Georgia.
Okay.
I just think that given what I know about Florida's roster, it is still Billy Napier trying to build this roster.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia has the deepest, best, and most talented roster in the country. And so I just think that when you're now 9 weeks in, because you had 7 games in the bye, I think given anything that piles up, any injuries or anything, Georgia's still going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Florida's not. Even if you're playing them at full strength,
Mm-hmm.
still Georgia. I just think that's how it goes. And yeah, I think for this year at least still, Georgia's still got the nod. Maybe next year we talk about, could Florida do it? With the most difficult schedule, I think, in college football history in 2024. We'll see what happens there. Arkansas, I think, is a win, but a very close win at that. Mainly because Arkansas's defense is so aggressive that I think Florida's rushing attack is going to have some issues, because I think they're just going to be constantly stuffed in the backfield. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game that nobody has fun watching except for sickos like me who care about good defense and defensive scheme. I think it's a win, but I think it's a very close win that could go either way. LSU, I think you lose. I think the Swamp is the toughest place to play in college football. I think Tiger Stadium's the second toughest. It's just so incredibly difficult to get about. They're going to make that a night game. I don't know why time TBA is there. They're going to make that a night game because they always do when it's Florida at LSU. So they're going to make that a night game. And when LSU fans are just pumped full of liquor for the entire day, it's going to be so difficult to win because they're going to be so rowdy and so loud and so obnoxious. And I think that Jaden Daniels is not an NFL quarterback, but I think he's a pretty damn good college football quarterback. And by that, I mean he's very good for college, but he's clearly not going to be a great NFL option. And I think LSU wins that one again. I think that that's one of the games where Florida's aggressive defense could come back to bite them. Just being so aggressive, the way LSU worked with Jaden Daniels was run the football with him, check the ball down, maybe take a deep play here and there, but for the most part, just don't screw up. And I think so LSU at LSU is just too difficult to win here right now for this Florida roster. Missouri, you should win. As simple as that. Like Florida should win that game. They're a better football team. and I hate Eli Drinkwitz. So for me, you should win that game if you're Florida, if you're Billy Napier. You won it last year when I wasn't sure if you would. This year, I feel more confident that you should. So you probably won't, but you should win that game against Missouri without a doubt in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so last game. Before I talk about this game, I do want to admit I'm a big fan of the Seminoles. I like what Mike Norvell. I like what Mike Norvell's doing for the program. I love Jordan Travis. I wish Jordan Travis was my quarterback. To me, he's that good. He's really good. And I called the game here on YouTube last year between the two. It was pretty good. That being said, it is in Gainesville, so that does hedge the bets towards Florida. I don't think you're in the Urban Meyer dominance over Florida State territory just yet. I mean, obviously you got to beat Florida State first to start to get there. But I've got them in the playoff to close out the CFP 14 playoff. I have them in against us, actually. But I also have heated rival up top there on October 28th, and I have Lincoln Riley and the Trojans. So obviously, I think Florida State's going to win this game because even though we defied all odds and lost the last regular season game and still got in order for Florida State to get in at the 3 spot, Florida State has to win the game. That being said, I do believe it was close last year. I do believe it's going to be close again this year. I'm thinking around 26-23-ish, maybe 27-24, 28-24. But it's going to be close, going to be defensive. And Jordan Travis is going to light Florida up in many different ways, as we saw last year. He's an amazing ground attack, and he can sure as heck throw the ball through the air.
Yeah. Look, I remember I tweeted in 2021 when Florida State played Florida. I said, if you treat Jordan Travis right, he can win the Heisman. So I'm fully on board. I think he's an incredibly talented kid. Not sure really what his NFL ceiling is, but as far as college, yeah, he can get the job done in every way, sense, and form. I think Florida State wins this game. I am also saying that I think Florida State, I'm not saying they're a playoff team, but I am saying they have a top 10 roster in college football. And look, Mike Norvell told me personally he will not take it easy on Florida. I asked him. I saw him at the Senior Bowl, and I said, hey, Mike, you're doing a great job. I cover the Florida Gators. I need you to be great for every week of the year but one. And he told me, that's a big game. I can't do that. Yeah, he's like, that's a big game. I can't do that. And I was like, damn. So I'm assuming that he's not going to take it easy on them, despite my best attempts to do that. But no, I think that Jordan Travis is a good quarterback. I think what Florida State did in the portal this year and even last year was fantastic. I remember hammering the table for Jared Verse to be a Florida Gator. He did not. Obviously, he's a Florida State Seminole. I thought he'd go to the NFL draft. He did not. He's a Florida State Seminole this year again. But just that offense is incredible. Keon Coleman joining Johnny Wilson to be the highest or the tallest receiver duo I've ever seen, with one at like 6'4", or one at 6'7", one at 6'4", is just remarkable. Adding Jaheim Bell at tight end / running back is incredibly impressive. Having Trey Benson on team there is great. If your offensive line holds up, you've really got a chance to be just incredible offensively and to hang really 40 a game if you want to do that. And with Jared Verse, I mean, you're always going to have at least a bit of a pass rush. Will it be great? We'll see. But I think Florida loses this game in a close one. And I will always say this: Florida State, absolute losers for last year, storming the field after beating a 6-5 Florida Gators team in which Florida State did not cover the spread. If you don't cover the spread in your favorites and you storm the field, absolute losers. So I will say that, but I do think that Florida State wins this one again. And as you said, not at Urban Meyer level of dominance. This Florida Gators team, not super deep. And, last game of the season, I'm not going to think that they're going to be fully healthy and ready to go. So not fully deep, probably going to have some injuries piling up. Going to be a bit of an issue, but I think Florida, for having a strong start, still finishes, with 7, maybe 8 wins. I'm in the camp that I think Florida is in that 6 to 8 win range this year.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing last year, same thing this year. Tougher. You're like your team's better this year compared to last year, but your schedule is tougher this year compared to last year. So I think that if you can just make a bowl game, free and clear. That's all I want. I want Florida to make a bowl game. I'd love it if you won it, but as long as you make a bowl game there, I'm pretty happy.
So you guys finished the regular season 6-6 last year. Okay. Based on our calculations of going through these, you're looking at, I think the ceiling is 10-2. I think that's if you can win Tennessee and Kentucky. Because we said Florida State, between the both of us, a loss. Georgia, even though it depends on how Georgia is coming into the game, we both agreed a loss. So ceiling's 10-2. Your floor is 8-4. Are you comfortable with anywhere between your floor and your ceiling? Like if you finish 7-5 or 6-6, are you going to be like angry? Or because the thing here is like, okay, again, Billy Napier, second year. You started 6-6. We need to see progress. If you don't finish better than 6-6, and I can't remember if you guys lost the bowl game or won it or not. Okay, so you finished 6-7 overall. If you don't finish better than 7-6, or really, see. Yeah, 7-6, and that's losing the bowl game again. If you don't finish better than that, then that's kind of I know you said the program is all in on Billy, but again, and I'm glad they are, because that's my biggest thing is like, okay, you're hiring these coaches, you're bringing them in, you sign them to like a 5-year deal. They don't pan out with showing progress in the first 2 years, so you cut them. Okay, that's not good. Your program is going to continue to be in the dumpster if you do that, as a generalization to all the schools out there. Are you okay with the 7-6? Are you okay with any kind of progress that gets shown from last year?
Yeah, I think a big part of that also is dependent on recruiting. Like if you go hell even 6-7. Let's say you're 6-6, 6-7. If you still right now at the time of recording this, Florida has, if you're looking at 24/7, a top 5 class. If you're looking at on 3, a top 3 class. If you're looking still top 8 to 10, because the class isn't going to get much better because you don't have much space to get much better. But if you're looking at top 8 still, and you go 6-6, 6-7, it's hard for me to be mad about that. Because even when you look at what Dan Mullen did recruiting wise, even when he had his 8th ranked class, 9th ranked class, you look at that class, most of the guys at the top either A, never actually enrolled in camp in Florida, or B, never panned out. You look at the 2018 class, which is probably the best class, or 2019 class, which is probably the best class to evaluate Dan Mullen compared to Billy Napier at this point. The best player from that class is the lowest ranked player in that class, Ethan White. He ended up being all SEC last year. So that's the best. That's why it's like Dan Mullen did things to get a high ranking class, but he did not do his due diligence as far as making sure you had good football players in your class. We've seen Billy Napier already be better than that. in his 2022 class, which he had literally a month to put together, he built actual contributors as true freshmen last year. Trevor Etienne, true freshman last year. And then this year, 2023 is expected to be better. 2024 class is looking fantastic right now. So I think when you are talking about what's happening with college football as far as their record goes, you have to look at recruiting here. And so 6-6, 6-7, as long as you maintain like a top 8 class, it's so hard for me to hate it. Like, obviously, I want to win more football games. I do. But as long as I'm seeing that there's process and progress and effort being put into this, I'm not going to be very mad. Like I'm one of the type of people where I evaluate things as, the process. I'm a process oriented person. I'm not just like get there no matter what. I'm get there doing the right things. And that's what Billy Napier is doing. So for me, if you have a good recruiting class and you're bowl eligible, let's say you go 6-6 and don't even make a bowl game. If you're bowl eligible, I'm happy with it. Or not happy, but I'm not mad at it. If you have 5 wins, then maybe I get a bit pissed off. But as long as you're bowl eligible and you have a good recruiting class, I'm not going to be super mad at what Billy Napier's doing.
I would think that you probably have to lose a lot of major key pieces to either injury or some kind of suspension, like the dumpster fire that Jimbo Fisher is running. For you to not get 5 wins, I mean, we completely broke down your schedule, and I don't see a way for you to not hit bowl eligibility 6 wins. But I mean, overall, you and I kind of fall in the same camp. I don't really pay attention to recruiting as much as I should, but that's a factor that a lot of people don't think about. As far as like, oh my gosh, his record is 6-6 constantly. He sucks. Get him out of town. Okay, what's he doing in recruiting? And how many players is he getting to the NFL with a 6-6 squad every year on an almost regular, consistent basis? Like, okay, for example, look at Steve Sarkisian compared to Tom Herman. They ran Tom Herman out of town. He was a consistent 8, 9, 10 win season coach. And they brought in 7-5 Steve Sarkisian. It makes no sense to me. So it's just one of those things that people don't always look at the whole picture when thinking, okay, this guy sucks. He stinks. This, that, and the other. And I'll admit it right now, right here. Sometimes I'm guilty of that too. Sometimes I say somebody stinks or somebody sucks because I don't like the team he plays on, or I don't like him. Like Tom Brady. Tom Brady is the GOAT in the NFL. You heard it here first. I still don't like Tom Brady. It has nothing to do with the fact he played at Michigan. It's because he constantly wins and he's shoved down our throats.
Yep.
But enough rambling from me.
Yeah. It's like Billy Napier, he's entering his 2nd year in Gainesville. By the end of his 3rd year, he can have 18 total wins. Like he can win 6 games last year, 6 games this year, 6 games next year. And if you're just looking at the record, that freaking sucks. But if you're looking at things from the grand scheme of things, 2022, tough schedule. Like being a first-year head coach and your first game or first-year SEC head coach and your first game being against Utah when most of your conference mates are playing their first games against Akron and UAB. Like that's tough. He's had a tough schedule. Florida's done a good job of building out tough opponents where you have Utah home and home last year, this year. Next year's schedule, 11 of your 12 games are against Power 5 opponents. That doesn't happen anywhere else, let alone like, oh, not everybody's doing that. Nobody's doing that. But next year, Florida's got Miami, UCF, you've got your 8 conference games. You've got Miami, UCF, Florida State. Those are your 11 Power 5 games. And then you have Samford as your one, supposed to be a gimme, but last time Florida played Samford, Emory Jones needed to set school records to win the football game.
Sure,
So
we have to do that.
Yeah, so that's why it's like when you take things into context, it's very different. Like next year is going to be, like I said earlier, I think the hardest schedule in college football history. But if you win 6 games in that schedule, that's a hell of a job if you're Billy Napier. So he could win with even though 18 wins in his first 3 years, and I'll still be happy with it. So as long as you're doing your job recruiting and building the program, I'm not going to complain.
So I got one last question for you, and it's relatable in a sense. So, for example, Ryan Day has lost the last 2 to, I'm not going to be that kind of OSU fan, Michigan. You can say it, folks. It's not that hard.
Voldemort.
It's not a big deal. It's not Voldemort. He's lost the last 2. And the consensus around the fan base as a whole, I'm talking probably 60 to 80% of the fan base, is, okay, we suffered through the Earl Bruce years and the John Cooper years. We had a lot of success with Jim Tressel. We give a pass to Luke Fickell because it was one season. It was the holdover year. And we had a crap ton of success under Urban Meyer. We want to continue this success, and we want to have it for the rest of our lives. There's 60 to 80% of the fan base says, get Ryan out of town now. To me, that's completely unfair. Do you feel like the fan base is slowly getting to that point that OSU's getting with Ryan Day? For me, I'm worried for his sake. I love the rivalry game to be a rivalry game. It kind of hurts the fact that we're going to 12, so it's not going to matter as much. But I love this back and forth. I'm worried for Ryan's sake that if we do lose to Michigan this year, it's really going to, like, okay, we need to reevaluate the contract with Ryan and see how soon and how we can get him out of town. What would turn your satisfaction with Billy Napier? And do you feel like the fan base is slowly leaning that direction? Which, again, I feel like the fan bases as a whole jump to that conclusion way too fast. These coaches are brought on, 5, 7, 10-year contract. They need to be able to actually have time to develop and produce. I'm okay with the losses. Like I said, it makes it a rivalry. And his recruiting is constantly in the top 10, as you mentioned, with Florida. Ohio State's is usually top 5, definitely top 10. So I'm good with it. But as far as the Florida end, what do you think that's going to take? I know it's a sour note. But what do you think that's going to take for the fan base to get there? And do you see those cracks starting to form?
Well, I think part of it depends on all right, first off, who are you considering the rival in this case? Because
Exactly.
Ohio State has Michigan. Are you considering Florida's Georgia or Florida State? Because those are then 2 different standards that are being set for
Right.
Florida. If you consider it Georgia, well, Kirby Smart's, I don't want to say the best recruiter in the country just because there's so many great ones, but he's top 5 at the absolute minimum. He's a top 5 recruiter in the country. Mm-hmm. So if it's Kirby, he's had basically a 3-year head start on Billy as far as building a roster. So you kind of deal with losing that. Especially it helps if the rival that you lose to is going undefeated and winning the national championship. It's like, okay, it sucks that they're doing it, but I get where Florida's at as a program. They're not supposed to be competing with national champions. So if you're considering in Georgia, it's going to take a little bit. If you're
considering this state would be Florida State, honestly,
yeah.
Because with Ohio State, Michigan, it's almost the interstate kind of battle, like little brother, big brother, Michigan State is. I mean, depending on who you talk to, some Michigan fans say, well, screw Ohio State because they always beat us, or when we win, we go on a long stretch of wins. So it's usually back and forth more with Michigan State. So it's kind of the same ordeal with Michigan. But for the closeness an almost interstate rivalry. Like, I would say it's more Florida State, honestly.
Yeah, if you're talking Florida State here, then that this is not a game that you can lose consistently. Florida fans are already kind of pissed that last year was the first time, and I genuinely don't even know the year off the top of my head, but a very long time that Florida lost to Tennessee, Georgia, Florida State, and Kentucky all in the same year. That just does not happen in Florida. So if that continues to happen, then it's an issue. If Florida and Florida State continue to be a battle, because it's also different where I just said, if it's Georgia and it's like this 3-year head start or whatever, then that's different. But for Florida State wasn't very good when Billy Napier took over. Like, they had a solid year last year, but this is also the team that 2 years ago, they lost to Jacksonville State. Like they lost to a very bad program. This is still a program that Mike Norvell is still trying to build. And it's also important for Florida that Mike Norvell is doing a lot of his damage in the transfer portal. He has not done a good job of straight up high school recruiting, which is the more sustainable method of recruiting here. So for Billy Napier, like you've got to be able to beat Mike Norvell. Maybe not this year. Like this year, the expectation for Florida State is college football playoff. That's truly like they're genuine. I think even on the schedule we just looked at, it said they're 3. So it's like this is truly a I don't want to say great program, but an incredibly talented program, because I don't want to call Florida State great, but an incredibly talented program. So if you're Florida, like you can't lose to Florida State multiple years. Like Dan Mullen, for all of his negatives, was beating Florida State. So if you're Napier, lose this year, we accept it. Cover the spread though. But lose this year, we accept it. Next year, we're having a different conversation if Florida loses again. Where I personally, I'm not going to be like, you need to beat Florida State. If you go 11-1 and your one loss every year is Florida State, I don't give a damn, because you're still going to the college football playoff. So I don't care that much. But
yeah, I think for most people's eyes, especially like our generations, the viewpoint of, okay, how important is Michigan, Ohio State, Florida, Florida State, Bama, Georgia, all these, USC, UCLA, all these big ones, how important is it really? Because, I mean, okay, for example, for us, we're probably looking at the possibility of Ohio State, Michigan 3 times a year. And I'm jacked for that, because you know what? We can split the first 2. We're definitely kicking your butt in the playoff. You can guarantee that. But I've enjoyed having you on. I know I kept you a little bit longer than you wanted. That's on me. I just love talking football.
Yeah, no, I had a blast. Had an absolute blast.
So where can the people find you?
Yeah, on Twitter, you can go to WNS_Brandon. And, 5-6 times. Hell, this week's going to be like 8 times a week. You can find Locked On Gators is going to be a lot, especially as recruiting's coming up. And yeah, that's mostly where you can find me. Find me on Giants Country with SI.com, covering the New York Giants, which blessing and a curse for both of my programs that I cover here. But that's where you can find all my stuff.
Hey, it's okay, because I bounce around with the NFL, but when it comes down to it, I am a diehard Browns fan, so I get the pain. Trust me, I get the pain when it comes to the NFL. Not so much with college football, obviously, but it makes up for it with the NFL pain. But thank you for coming on. Hopefully we can work something out. If more likely when you guys make a bowl game, we can get that scheduled, maybe have you on again. Like I said, I don't see you guys not making a bowl game, honestly. You have too many not so good schools. Not to like hurt the resume or anything, but there's enough there to win 6 games and make a bowl game. There's no doubt. But thanks again for coming on. I will keep in touch, and hopefully we can get you on in the future.
Hopefully. Can't wait.